Hello everyone and welcome back to Anomalous Archive, where we post scary stories to help you sleep. Please comment where you are listening to my videos from, since I believe it would be fun for all of us to know. Also, please don't forget to like and subscribe. So without further ado, sit back, relax and enjoy. Every summer, I suffer from insomnia ever since my school years. I remember that as soon as vacation started, falling asleep at night became impossible, as if my brain, deprived of academic workload, slipped into idle mode and simply did not have time to get tired during the day. So on summer nights, I read a lot and set up a spot for that on the balcony. I put a chair there with small soft pillows and a fluffy blanket, dragged in a folding table, stretched out extension cords, and plugged in a lamp. It felt so nice to settle there late in the evening with a cup of tea, a plate of my mom's pancakes, and a saucer of condensed milk. I never read books from the school summer reading list. I only took those that interested me. For example, I liked the books from the Library of Thrilling Mysticism series, where each cover included 2 novels or sometimes several novellas. I adored the detective story When Michael Calls by John Ferris, the thriller Psycho by Robert Bloch, and the horror novel Rosemary's Baby by Sarah Levin. I'm not sure if I would like these books now, but back then, I read them non-stop, night after night, sitting on the balcony, surrounded by sleeping houses. Below lay our enclosed courtyard, paved with asphalt, and beyond it loomed dark, dense thickets. The nights passed quietly. The only constant noise was made by nighttime insects in the grass. Sometimes, somewhere far away, I heard the hum of the occasional car, a dog barking, or some night owl shouting down the street. But most often, nothing happened in the dark hours. One time, I was on the balcony reading, wrapped in a blanket, and noticed movement below. A person was slowly walking across our yard. I glanced at him for a second and went back to reading, thinking it was just someone passing by. Through the corner of my eye, I saw that the figure was moving silently near the sidewalk, and I paid no attention until he disappeared. He was just there and then suddenly gone. I looked up. Where had he gone? Did he duck into the bushes? There wasn't even a rustle. I peered down into the darkness below the balcony and noticed an open manhole. The cover was moved aside, revealing the gaping hole of the sewer. Right away, an image flashed in my mind. The person didn't see the hole, took a step, and fell into the darkness. I shuddered. My heart thumped. What should I do? I couldn't just leave it. This person might have been seriously hurt falling into the manhole, or maybe even died if no one did anything. Hey, are you down there? I shouted from the balcony, but only an echo answered me. What if I had only imagined that person? Maybe it was just a shadow crawling across the asphalt, an optical illusion and nothing more. Still, I had to make sure no tragedy had happened. I decided to go down to the yard, taking a flashlight with me, no ordinary one, but an old American bug flashlight that worked without batteries, powered by a built-in dynamo. To make it shine, you had to exert yourself, squeezing the metal handle quickly in your hand. I think my older brother, Alex, had teased me by giving it to me, saying it was a good exercise to develop and strengthen my fingers. So I ran outside with it, squeezing it in my hand like a hand gripper. The flashlight shone only as long as you kept moving that handle. I knelt down by the open manhole. It was quiet and dark below. The bulb didn't have enough power to see everything clearly. Its sputtering light picked out old pipes, a valve, and torn insulation hanging in strips. Is anyone there? I shouted and dropped to my knees on the cold asphalt. August nights were chilly, and I was only wearing slippers, a tank top, and house shorts. I didn't see anyone below and figured I had imagined it. It was silly, but worth checking. Civic awareness is a good thing. I figured I should at least close the manhole so no one else would actually fall in. I stopped squeezing the flashlight's handle, and in the final second before the light went out, I saw a face staring at me from the depths of the shaft. It was so unpleasant looking that I screamed and jumped back. The person looked awful. His skin was covered in scars and burns, as if someone had poured acid on him. His eyes were small and mean, like a rat's. As I walked back up to my apartment, more details popped into my mind: a torn lip, a bald head with peeling skin, raw and flaking. The manhole was still open. He could climb out again. I told myself there was nothing to fear. This man, frightening as he appeared, wasn't necessarily dangerous. He was most likely a homeless person with nowhere else to go. I stayed in my room until 8 in the morning, then went into the living room and turned on the TV to watch reruns of yesterday's shows, trying to push that creepy image out of my head. I got sleepy as the sun shone brightly through the window, so I went back to bed and slept until noon. The first thing I did when I got up was go out on the balcony and look down. The manhole cover was back in place. Kids were running around the yard. My chair lay there with an open book on it, my empty plates on the table, and cold tea in the mug. It all felt unreal now, but it had really happened. I told my older brother that I had seen a homeless man whose face had been burned by acid, and he just said, "Got it." He was tired of my stories. Alex never treated me as an equal, always saw me as a kid who talked nonsense. My impressions quickly got overshadowed by everyday chores. I had to go to the store, wash the dishes, and dust. They always piled on housework, saying I did nothing but laze around till noon. I only felt truly free at night when everyone else was asleep. Finally, I could sneak something tasty from the fridge, make some tea, and sit on the balcony with a good book. Where was I? I picked up my reading again, a rather fascinating novel called Disaster, about nature taking vengeance on humanity for its ecological carelessness. The avenging force here was butterflies. They flew into windows in dense swarms, attacked people, and devoured them like piranhas. The night air was fresh after the rain. Everything was quiet, but I still didn't feel as cozy as usual. Fear hovered like a phantom, making me glance down into the yard from time to time. In the darkness, I saw that man again. He stood by the open sewer manhole, his silhouette starkly outlined against the pale asphalt. He wore dirty, worn clothes, and his face looked bleached, with unnaturally pale skin marked by terrible injuries, burn holes and blisters. The man was staring at the windows of our building, almost mesmerized, and suddenly his gaze fell on me. This was no dream, it was real. I couldn't make myself look directly at him. Fear made me avert my eyes, but my peripheral vision sensed he wasn't moving. Then I noticed another person. He stood at the opposite end of the yard, also bald, with identical marks on his skin reminiscent of chemical burn scars. My head swam with terror. Panicking, I looked around and saw a third figure standing under the streetlight by the entrance. Even from the third floor, I could make out the melted flesh on his face and neck, the raw, exposed tissue, and those small, maliciously narrowed eyes. What had happened to them? Why did they look so horrifying? Their faces made me conjure wild theories. Maybe they were victims of an acid tanker explosion or some other chemical accident, forced to live in the shadows ever since. Or maybe they had no connection to the human race at all. Perhaps they were a different species, unknown nocturnal creatures. I couldn't figure out what they were doing or why they were in our yard, why they stared at the windows of a sleeping building. What did they want here? I watched as they seemed to scout something, then gathered into a single group. Their movements were slow, almost robotic. The first, who had been by the manhole, took a step and silently jumped into the darkness, then the second did the same, and the third. The lid slid into place. So that's it. There must be a place down there where they live. Maybe they were some kind of subterranean beings that emerged from the sewer. And am I the only one who now knows their secret? I stayed awake until morning, waiting anxiously for my family to wake up. Finally, music came from Alex's room. He had turned on the tape player, so he was up. There was one strict rule Alex had set: never, under any circumstances, cross the threshold of his room. Heaven forbid I touch his stuff. That's how difficult my older brother was, ever since I was born. I always envied him. It seemed like Alex had everything better. He had a stamp collection and a pen collection. Could I touch them? Absolutely not even look at them. He also had a whole box of comics under his bed, and he somehow always got the best toys, teasing me but never letting me so much as hold them. Did he give them to me when he grew up? No way. Even at 23, he still acted like the same sulky teen, and I was just a kid to him. But who else could I trust with such a story? I knocked on his door and said it was serious. He wouldn't let me in, told me to talk from the hallway, so I told him everything I had seen the previous 2 nights. Alex abruptly sat up in bed, scratched his messy hair thoughtfully, then said, "I know who Annie is." My heart pounded. "Yes, I know," he said, looking genuinely worried. "Who?" "Don't leave me hanging." I stepped into the room. "Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles," he shouted, bursting into laughter. "Shut the door on your way out or I'll throw a slipper at your forehead. They jumped into the sewer, right? Are you nuts? You should be sleeping at night, you sleepwalker." I was furious with him. He always found a way to belittle me. Yes, I had loved Ninja Turtles when I was a kid, everyone did, and every manhole reminded me of those good green mutants. Some of those metal covers even looked like turtle shells, especially the domed ones with a grid or diamond pattern. For us kids, it was a secret sign that maybe the manhole was an entrance to the turtles' hideout. Yet at the same time, we were also afraid of those shafts. There was a superstitious belief that stepping on a manhole cover was bad luck, and if you accidentally did, you had to tap your left shoulder 3 times and say, 1, 2, 3, don't walk on the manhole. Some kids added, "Mom and Dad, don't die." Why were we so scared of manholes as children? Maybe we sensed there was another mysterious world down there. "Don't stomp on the cover, they'll hear." I mulled over this, trying to sketch those strange people from memory, bald, with deep scars on their faces, squinting with those tiny, hostile eyes. I thought about them so much all day that by evening, I was exhausted. Instead of reading, I fell asleep before midnight. By morning, something unimaginable had happened in our building. A lonely neighbor on the first floor had been robbed and killed. Both crimes were bizarre. The details, circulating as rumors, were disturbing. It wasn't an ordinary robbery. Uncle John's apartment was found open, the door broken down. Inside, there was a mess, especially in the kitchen. The fridge door stood open, scraps of food on the floor, a piece of sausage, a piece of cheese, some sauerkraut, a smashed jar of pickled tomatoes. It looked like someone had grabbed anything and everything, taken a bite, and tossed it on the floor. A wardrobe in the room was open, with empty hangers on the carpet. Somebody stole random clothes but didn't touch the money lying in plain sight. Worst of all, Uncle John was found dead in the hallway, his neck twisted. On his face and under his chin were chemical burns in the shape of fingers and palms. And I was the only one guessing what had really happened. It had to be them, the subterranean people from the sewer. They'd spent 2 nights scouting our yard, and on the 3rd night, they broke into the apartment of one of the residents. They took clothes, ate his food, and didn't bother with anything else, since money means nothing in their underground world. The nature of the break-in said a lot. These beings were strong enough to bust down a door and snap a man's neck, and their touch alone seemed dangerous, like acid. Possibly their bodies produce secretions that burn their own skin, explaining why they're covered in scars. I came up with theories and wrote them down in a notebook like a detective, but I didn't hurry to tell anyone. My brother's reaction was enough for me. Others wouldn't believe a teenager raving about subterranean people. All day, the police combed our yard, but by evening, things quieted down. Only one outspoken elderly woman knocked on everyone's door, declaring that it was high time we all chipped in for a code-locked entry downstairs. Normal people have had those for ages, she said, and we're just sitting here waiting to be killed. I agreed with her. We had to do something, weld that manhole shut, at least, so they couldn't come at night. Or at least wedge a heavy rock on top. My older brother spent the whole day outside, tinkering with his old Ford in the yard, so I went down and asked, "Alex, can you park your car so that the wood blocks the manhole cover?" He smirked. "Why, so the evil Ninja Turtles won't kidnap you? You're such an idiot. People steal covers all the time and sell them for scrap. On the next street, they took them all yesterday. Go look." "I'm serious," I said. "Why should I care?" Alex wiped his dirty hands with a rag. I didn't really expect him to do it, but then he got behind the wheel, started the engine, and moved the car so the front tire wedged against the manhole cover. He winked at me. "Fine, if anyone steals that hunk of metal, it'll be me." Night fell, and Detroit went quiet, as if everyone had forgotten yesterday's tragedy. They barricaded themselves in their apartments and went to sleep. It seemed I was the only one keeping watch over our yard. What would those sewer dwellers do this time? Would they try the blocked cover or find another path? Would they show up at all? I sat in my balcony chair, wrapped in a blanket, keeping the lights off to avoid drawing attention. The street lamps buzzed softly, crickets chirped in the brush, a lullaby of the night. It was hard to stay alert, and drowsiness pulled me in. I gave in, set an alarm for an hour later, and lay down in bed. But I was awakened by a completely different noise. A car alarm blared across the entire yard. I jumped up and rushed to the balcony. My hair stood on end. Alex's old Ford lay on its side, and that was the alarm echoing off the buildings. The manhole was open, and right there on the asphalt next to the car sat one of those terrifying subterranean people. The yard flashed with the pulsating strobe of the alarm lights. My heart pounded as I realized that this individual had shoved aside the manhole cover and flipped the car. How strong was he? No locked door could protect us from that. But something was off about him. He looked disoriented, even frightened. It seemed the car alarm's wail was causing him pain. He clutched his ears, screamed, thrashed his head from side to side, and then, in a panic, dove back into the sewer, pulling the cover shut. I stood there, staring at the aftermath, when suddenly I realized I wasn't alone on the balcony anymore. My nose caught a sharp, cheap cologne scent. Beside me was Alex, wearing only his underwear, terror contorting his face. Naturally, he'd missed the whole event and only cared about his car. "What the?" Alex yelled, his voice hoarse with fright. He dashed off to get dressed and wake our dad. I stood there in a daze. If my brother had woken up a little earlier, he would have seen everything with his own eyes, and I wouldn't have to prove anything. Soon the entire building was wide awake. Alex and Dad roused the neighbors to help flip the car back on its wheels. Then my brother stormed into my room like a raging bull, his eyes full of fury. He unleashed his anger, insisting it was all my fault. Thieves had tried to steal the cover and overturned his car out of spite because he blocked it. That was his story. "You're buying me a new side mirror, got it? You better hope the car starts tomorrow," he yelled, grabbing me by the shoulders and shaking me so hard my head spun. I didn't argue. Alex was out of his mind with rage, and any argument would sound like sarcasm to him. I had to stand there in silence, enduring his curses. I couldn't tell him the truth. He'd never believe me. What could be done? These beings, coming to our street from underground, clearly wouldn't leave us alone. They'd been spying, watching our windows. They wouldn't just steal a little food and some clothes and then vanish. They were like rats, only far more dangerous, as proven by Uncle John's corpse. I knew they would return, break into someone else's place, and kill again. Maybe next time it would be us, and we'd have no defense against such power. But I had learned something crucial the previous night. The subterranean people seem afraid of noise. That's why they come in the quiet hours, when everyone's asleep. My anxiety grew by the minute. I couldn't handle this alone anymore. I decided to talk to my friends, guys from the neighboring blocks we often hung out with. Maybe they could help, if not with action, then at least with advice. I went around to everyone I knew and told them the whole story. Some rolled their eyes, saying my imagination had gone wild. Others nodded, agreeing that something weird was happening in Detroit. Stories of people vanishing without a trace and mysterious, horrifying deaths were circulating. Many felt the entire Detroit had gone insane. My friends were sympathetic, tried to calm me down, but no one offered real help. It was my problem, and I was the only one willing to do anything about it. A crazy plan formed in my head, imperfect, yet the only one. Waiting until Alex left the house, I sneaked into his room. It felt nerve-wracking to be in this forbidden space, like if I bumped something, he'd know immediately. I had to be careful or I'd blow everything. I walked around the room and opened his closet. On the top shelf stood a treasured box piled under clothes. Alex checked often to make sure it was still there. I hoped I'd have at least one night before he noticed something was gone. Fear clawed at me, but I took that prized box and carefully carried it to my own room. That was just the first step. Alex came home, and I tried to stay out of his way. If he saw me, he'd know from my face that something was up. Night came, and the apartment grew silent as everyone else dozed off. Time to take the box and slip out unseen. As I stepped out the door, I realized how reckless this was. Those creatures could easily kill me. Even so, I went downstairs and sat on the front steps, nervously flicking a lighter, burning my nerves along with the gas. The minutes dragged like hours, my gaze fixed on the manhole. Sooner or later, they would come. Then, faintly, the manhole cover began to lift, slowly, almost silently. It shifted aside, forming a gap. They were preparing to climb out. I heard their heavy breathing echo from below. My lighter trembled in my hand. I leaned over the box, lit the fuse, which flared bright and yellow, spitting sparks. With a shove of my foot, I kicked the box into the shaft, right onto someone's head, then sprinted back to the doorway. The fuse burned fast, and there came a flash and a thunderous boom. A brilliant blast shot upward, scattering a rainbow of sparks. From below came monstrous shrieks, cries of terror and rage. The nightly darkness of the yard, the thick foliage, and the sky above lit up with a dazzling pyrotechnic display. The box I stole was Alex's stash of holiday fireworks for New Year's. The roar of exploding fireworks shattered the silence, setting off car alarms around the neighborhood. Lights switched on in the windows of our building as people woke up, startled by the racket. The fireworks whistled, banged, and crackled. Not one creature crawled out of that sewer. Their screams died away. I had done it. I'd driven them back into the depths. The last bursts of light illuminated the balcony where Alex stood. His face twisted in fury, and he ran his hand across his throat, threatening me. But I no longer felt my old fear of him. Yes, I knew he would never understand why I did this, why I stole his fireworks and set them off in a sewer in the middle of the night. I just smiled, thinking, sure, he'll yell at me, threaten me, and shake me by the shoulders, but I'll survive it. I drove away the monsters, and I protected our home.